Hello, friends. My name is Heather Gill, and I'm a certified hypnotherapist, certified life coach, author, caregiver, and self-proclaimed practical optimist. Now, today, I'm going to tell a story that's in my book called Reflections on Life and Living. And the other one is a story not from my book, but from my career working with young children. Now, today or this weekend, something very serious has happened in my country, and that is that the government has been shut down for 33 days now, and basically that means that Congress and the Senate, the Republicans and the Democrats, can't find a way to come together for now to make sure that these very essential programs are being funded. And the most serious is the healthcare system and what we call SNAP. And that's basically the government funding programs like food banks and food that people can get in shelters, or they also have a SNAP card, which is a benefit card that's funded by the government and taxpayers to help them get the food that they need to eat to survive. And my first story is about that. So once upon a time, when I still worked for the schools, I remember shortly after I started, part of my duties were to monitor the children in the lunchroom. And that means everything from helping them carry their tray to the table to addressing behavior issues and maybe even cutting up some of the food and so on. Well, after 3 or 4 days, I started to notice a pattern. I saw this young girl who was standing away from the lunch tables, kind of off to the side, and she wasn't sitting with anyone. And, when I would walk by her, I'd smile and say hi, but sometimes she would answer me and sometimes she would just stare off into space. That 1,000-yard stare that people have when they're not trying to focus on looking at other people or what's going on around them. So I'd pass by this girl every day, and I noticed that she never got in line to get food. And after a while, I could tell that it was all she could do to not cry. So I'd walk past her, and one day it hit me. She doesn't have money to get food, and her parents didn't send her to school with any kind of school lunch. So I went over to where the cashier was sitting, and I said, "Do you see that girl over there?" And I didn't look, but look over at her because I didn't want her to feel uncomfortable or anything. And the cashier said, "Yes, I know her." And she told me her name. And I said, "I think she's hungry. Can I put, a couple dollars on her books so that she could get something to eat?" And the cashier said, "Well, I don't know that I can do that. I think you'd have to go to the office and see if you could either set up an account for her or something similar." So I talked to my partner, my work partner, and I said, "Would you be okay if I ran to the office for a minute?" And she said, "Okay." So I went to the office and I talked to one of the main secretaries, and I said, "Gosh, I noticed there's a student in there." And then while I was speaking, the assistant principal or vice principal came up and sort of listened in. And I said, "There's someone that I noticed, she stands in the cafeteria every day. She never sits to take out her lunch. She doesn't talk to anybody. And she looks away when I try and make eye contact. And I said, I'd like to put some money on her books so she could eat, because children, if they're hungry, or anybody, if they're hungry, they have a hard time learning. They can't retain it. And at the age these kids were, you know, they have to have good, proper nutrition in order to grow and thrive. And the assistant principal said, if we go in there and you kind of indicate which student it is, there's a free lunch program for people who can't afford it. And I can kind of, without making it a big deal, ask her to follow me to the office and we can see what we can do about getting her signed up. And I said, okay. And I said, but in the meantime, could I put some money on her books? And he was like, let me see what I can do about it today, but I'll make sure she eats today. And I said, okay, because at the schools, because of how things work sometimes, children who come from poorer backgrounds can have breakfast and lunch at school so that we know at least they get 2 meals a day. There's also other programs, but those are the 2 main ones. So I said, okay. And he was like, oh, that's so wonderful that you wanted to do that. And I said, thank you. But in my mind, I was thinking, you know, we should all pay attention to things like that. And I tried to put myself in her shoes. Think about it. She had to stand there and watch people eat, knowing that she didn't have any, and she certainly wasn't going to steal it. And she had to stand there and smell it. She had to be there when the kids picked what they wanted to eat for lunch. And she knew that she couldn't have any. And sure enough, this vice principal was true to his word, and we went in there, and I kind of wandered over near by where she was standing, and of course she moved off. It was middle school, which means in the area I lived in, primary school was kindergarten through 5th grade, and then middle school was 6th through 9, and then high school was 10th, 11th, and 12th. And then if you were fortunate enough or decided you want to go on to college or trade school, then you would do that. But anyway, the principal was as good as his word. And I saw her sit down with peanut butter and jelly sandwich and some vegetables and so on. And then little by little, I watched her, and she changed. She started to smile a lot more, and I noticed that she was sitting down. And at first, she just sat down at one of the tables where she wouldn't be noticed. And then, little by little, some kids would come and sit with her. And before you knew it, she was laughing and joking around just like a lot of the kids did. And to me, it made my heart sing, because I had sort of been there a while back. I didn't have enough food for me and my kids. I remember saving a lot of what I considered the good food for when my kids were there, and I would eat toast, and that was all I had. And I had good people who looked out for me. They would say, hey, I brought an extra sandwich. Do you want one? Hey, I did this. Do you want some? So I know what it is to be hungry, but the toll that it can take on a young child who doesn't have enough food can have lifelong repercussions. Now, this next story is kind of wonderful, and it's something that I'm really proud of. One day when I've actually, a little bit of background is I've worked at every level of the public school system. And this next story takes place since I worked in special education, they would blend classes. So ours would be kindergarten through third grade. And those are the grades I want to talk about. And I don't mention names. And on this one, I changed the gender of the child and the school counselor. And like I said, I'm not going to give names because it doesn't matter. All I want to talk about is what we can do when we come together as a community. So that being said, in the kindergarten class, we all noticed that there was a little boy who came to school and he was dirty every day. His little hands and nails were always dirty. His face was dirty. His arms were dirty. So what we did is, we'd have him wash up when he got there and get him settled in and get him ready for school. When the weather started to change, we noticed that while he wore long sleeves, he didn't have a coat with him. And in Oregon, the state that I live in, we usually have a few snowy days, but the temperatures can get down in the 20s and below, certainly in the 30s Fahrenheit in the winter. So it's important for kids to have coats. So I know that at the school I worked at, there was people who would donate coats or the lost and found if they, weren't retrieved by somebody within a certain amount of time. They would give some of the coats away to children who needed it. So I went, and since I know this school psychologist, of course, right? I went to him and I said, hey, Mr. Jones, not his last name, we have a child in our class that doesn't have a coat, and he comes to school almost every day, dirty and kind of scuffed up. I said, is there anything that we can do? And Mr. Jones loved more than being a school counselor, which he adored and he was magnificent at. He liked doing social work. So he was well connected with a lot of the social service agencies. And he knew how to talk to people so that it wouldn't be insulting to say, do you need a coat for your kid? So he called the kid's parents and he explained that the boy had been coming to school dirty, and the mother said, oh gosh, I work 2 jobs, and at night I get back when I work night shift, I get back just in time to see them off to the bus stop. But I know that they play there and they get dirty and so on. And he said, well, we really need the children to come to school, dressed appropriately and clean. he said, because a lot of times the other kids might make fun of children who are dirty, because this school was in a fancier area, an area with money. And here it's a little bit different. It's where the schools that are well funded and in areas with a lot of money attract better teachers, better families, better kids, because they spend money on education. In the poorer areas, it's not as well funded. They don't have as current literature. They don't have a lot of things that the fancier schools have. In fact, a lot of parents will try and get a better education for their children by claiming that they live at a relative's house in the school district, when in fact they either are homeless and living in their car, or they are actually live in a not so good area, but they want their kids to have a good education. So anyway, the next morning, we're all doing our morning work and getting ready to have another full day of school. And the school counselor comes in and he motions to the little boy. He says, "Hey, Sam, I need you to come with me for a minute." And, they're elementary school, so they're not going to tease him for having to go out with the counselor, because the counselor was in and out of our classrooms and other classrooms too. He was very visible and a very caring and good individual. So about 10 minutes later, this boy, comes skipping into the classroom. And normally we don't, they can't just run around and not do their work and etc. But this boy, his face shone. I mean, there was so much light in his face. And he was walking around the classroom in his new, warm winter coat. And it was the kind with the little puffy sleeves and everything like that. A really nice warm jacket with a hood. And I remember just the joy on his face at having a way to stay warm now during the winter months. And every day after that, he wore that coat, no matter what the weather was, even through the spring and close to the end of the school year. Because, you see, it was more than just a coat. It was security for him. It became his security, his feeling of a hug, his feeling that not only did his parents care about him, which they did, they really did, and they were both hardworking people who just had a hard time making ends meet and taking care of their children, but it was obvious that they tried the best that they could. And he did come to school clean after the school psych called his parents, and the school psych also put them in touch with resources so that they could get coats, so that they could get food, they could have books to read their children, because they wanted to do all those things. But this coat symbolized so much more than a way to keep warm. It was our way of saying to him, "We care about you. We've got your back. We're not going to let you go cold. Come to school cold or hungry or any number of things." And I know that he remembered it, because after the third grade, they'd go to the next class, which was fourth and fifth grade. And every day, because I went out to the buses to make sure the kids got on okay, and every day When I looked up at the window where he was sitting on the bus, he would go like this. I don't know if you can tell what I'm doing, but I'm trying to make a heart with my hands. And he would do that at me. And I would go like this. And he would just nod his head. And you see, that's something we can all do. We can care for each other without hurting our own families. We can go through maybe our food stores, like our pantry, or wherever you might keep canned goods or boxes of food or cereal or whatever. And like, for example, we have an area in my house that has a lot of different kinds of tea, because my husband is a tea drinker and I'm a coffee girl. But I've tried different kinds of tea, and I apologize to my friends in England who drink lots of tea. And it is amazingly good for you, and it does a million good things, but it doesn't taste like anything to me. My husband likes Earl Grey, and I like coffee so strong you can practically stick a fork in it. But anyway, I went through the tea closet. We had a whole bunch of boxes, and I have some clothes that I kind of don't wear, and so does my husband and my son. And the place that I work, where my one client lives, is a federal building, and it's for people who don't have a lot of money. So occasionally when I go there, knowing this, I put some boxes of tea, or I bring in macaroni and cheese or evaporated milk. There aren't children there, it's for adults. But I try and bring in little things from time to time. And it doesn't hurt my family because it's money already spent. And we are not wealthy, but we're not poor. So there are things that we can definitely, share with others without it hurting us. And that's the thing, my friends. The important thing is to share what we have if we don't use it, or if we have extra. For example, a little evaporated milk in a box of macaroni and cheese that you buy at the store and you heat it up on the stove. Instead of adding regular milk, evaporated milk makes it really rich, and it makes it stay with you a little bit longer. And it's a huge treat, because the people that live there and other places like that, I know they will be suffering because they won't have a way to get food unless those programs are funded. And this isn't a commercial for that. It's just a bare bones telling of the facts of life in America. Some states and places do a little bit better. Some places do a little worse. There are quite a few people who are okay right now, and I think the honorable thing to do is, if you have clothing you haven't worn in a long time that you're going to donate anyway, either donate, if you have children that outgrow their clothes, donate it to a school. They'll make sure it gets to the right people. A lot of places have family centers where families can go in and pick out clothing like underwear, socks, shoes, jackets, a multitude of things, just to help families out, because it's hard to make a living wage for a lot of people. And that being the case, Don't you think it's our honor and our duty to help if we can? I do. And you'll feel better for it, and so will they. So, my friends, I need to end for this week. And I hope that you are safe and well. And I hope that these stories touched your heart a little bit, because they're absolutely true. They are. And for me, for anyone to go hungry is a crime, because in this country we have a lot of food. There's a lot of soup kitchens or shelters where a person can go to get some food. I know that because I've worked at one that is in a very dangerous section of a town that's very close to me, a place where I always felt better walking out than when I did walking in, because the people there know that I was there to feed them, to serve them, not for money, not for any other reason than because I could. And the thing is you can come up with a lot of different ways to help out your fellow men, women, children, binary, non-binary. It doesn't matter. We're all humans, and we need food, shelter, and a little kindness. Anyway, thank you so much for listening today. And remember, straight back, head high, looking forward. Don't look back, because you're not going that way. And go out, meet your destiny, smile, and help somebody out today. Again, my name is Heather Gill. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, life coach, author, and self-proclaimed practical optimist. And I hope you go out there and you look for the good and do some good. Thank you. I can be reached at www.heathergilllifecoaching.com. There's all kinds of contact information on there, or if you just want to leave me a message, that's totally fine too. Have a wonderful week. Thank you.